All right, let's dive into today's topic. I'm going to share my screen with you here. Give me just a moment. So today we are actually continuing our conversation of how to build kind of this investor in education engagement funnel. So, we've been working through the past few months. We started at the top of the funnel. Now we've taken our investor all the way through the funnel, and we're talking about once they're in our world, how do we continually nurture them for max engagement? And this is something that I really love doing. But again, this talk is a part of 5 systems that are necessary for you in your syndication business to put into place to convert investors with ease. That's the whole point. Serve your investors, serve yourself with ease. And also to help you avoid some common mistakes that, in landmines that many syndicators walk into that actually turn investors away. And this 5-part system actually will help streamline your program for max effectiveness. Now, many of you have joined me on some of my other educational webinars and talks. And long story short, you're probably very familiar with my investing journey in real estate. I've been in real estate for 21 years. I've done it all. I've done live-in flipping, house hacking, rehabbing, small single-family residential real estate, larger multifamily residential real estate. I've syndicated, and really at the end of the day, the most powerful piece for building wealth is getting into, if you have the desire and drive, okay, key point here, if that is what you want, is to get into those larger institutional grade assets. Now, as part of my journey, I've been in the private equity space going on 7 years now. And, this whole system that I've been walking you guys through is part of the system that I have learned and cultivated and developed over those 7 years to be able to engage the investor and take them through an educational funnel. Now, part of my journey is I come from corporate training, right? So I was in public health, yes, but part of my role was in facilitation, education, and training, more specifically corporate training. So that's where I'm pulling these pieces in from that world. Now, if you decide to execute this from end to end, you might see results like these, because, in 2 years, whenever I really kind of put all the puzzle pieces together in my head and I brought the system into the private equity world, I was able to help co-syndicate 26 deals, 3x the investor list that I was working with, and more importantly, 19x the investor capacity, meaning that we were finding higher qualified investors, and the investors that were already on our list, they were more comfortable. They knew us, they loved us, they trusted us to be able to do repeat investments. And that is something that we have been able to bring into the passiveinvesting.com world, as you can see with our numbers here. Okay, so again, investor nurturing is kind of phase 5. The 5th system in a 5-part system. The first system is the spider web system, okay, where you learn how to create content one time, but use it 156 different ways. Yes, you heard that correctly. Create content one time, okay, do one major heavy lift, but be able to revamp that content in multiple ways and potentially create 156 individual pieces of content from that one heavy lift. Then we talked about the lead magnet, and the lead magnet isn't necessarily what you think. I remember when I did this presentation over the lead magnet, so many people were frustrated with me, and they were like, we thought you were going to go through how to put together an ebook or how to put together a checklist. No, it's about actually how do you move people off of one platform onto your platform. That's the lead magnet. It's really creating that compelling case. And then there's the get to know you system. How do you get to know that investor and qualify them, move them from a lead to a prospect? Now, for those of you who are passive investors and you're on this webinar and you might be going, wow, that sounds amazingly salesy. Well, it is. I mean, we are in business, but as a passive investor, you also want to understand what a good process looks like, because you want to be with an operator who understands you, what your challenges are, what your obstacles are, and how they can help serve you. So you want to understand what value you should be getting out of that get to know you process. Okay. And then 2 months ago, back in February, we talked about the investor onboarding process. Okay. How can you, in a very streamlined, succinct way, start onboarding your investor into your world? Now, we are going to actually kind of pick up the tail end of the onboarding process for those of you, because I need to kind of catch some of you guys up. And then we're going to go into the investor nurturing process. Okay, we are towards the end of the real heavy lift, but this is where the max engagement process actually happens. And again, if you're an active investor, take notes. This is great fodder for you to bring into your world to build your system. If you're a limited partner, take notes, because you need to understand what a good process looks like and what you should be looking for from an operator that really values your partnership. Okay, so why have an investor nurturing process? Okay, I always like starting with why. You have to first understand that investor nurturing is different from marketing. And I think a lot of people really confuse that. They think if I'm doing, marketing, branding, I'm posting things on social media, I'm constantly putting out content. This is marketing. People are going to be attracted to that and come into my world. And that is very true, very true. But nurturing is taking this one step further. It is actually reaching out to that investor and saying, hey, come walk this path with me. Let me help you solve your issues. Let me understand what your challenges are. And let me be that person that can serve you. Okay, that's different. Now, you might be able to achieve that a little bit with your marketing and branding, but nurturing is a far different type of relationship. So, what are some things that we want to do here with investor nurturing? We want to make sure we are engaging this lead prospect, okay, the limited partner, potential limited partner, maybe even our old investors that have not reinvested with us for quite a while, and continually build that trust, credibility, and transparency with them. Those are the three things that you're constantly doing. It's not saying, hey, look at my new shiny deal that I got going on. That is part of it, right? But it's really like, why should they engage with you? Why should they continue to trust you to be a good steward of their money? Why are you credible? Why are you a credible leader in the space? And are you transparent in your business? Are you somebody that they could do business with over and over and over again? Those are the feelings in a nurturing process that you're trying to tap into. Now, another thing with your nurturing process, and this is a mistake, I would mark this as a landmine that I see syndicators do, is that they put out walls of information, okay? You want to make sure that in your nurturing process is that, there's small bites of information and that you have two very important automated sequences in place. And we're going to talk about what those are. And then past that, we can it's a choose your own adventure. I'm going to kind of give you a palette of nurturing ideas that you can take and move forward with and implement in your business. But make sure that you're creating small bites. We're all busy. There is a rule in corporate training that it's called rapid training. And that is, can you keep your training to 5 to 7 minutes? Now, guys, today is not a rapid training session. So I have got a ton of information to impart to you. But when you are engaging somebody, can you hold their attention for 5 to 7 minutes and impart what your message is? Okay, past that, if you look at any of your metrics, maybe you're doing a podcast, maybe you're doing webinars, you might see a massive dive off like after 20 minutes, but really there's disengagement between 7 and 20 minutes. Okay, so again, create small bites. All right, when you're putting together your nurturing materials or your investor onboarding process, and I'm going to bring up this point again, is don't assume the investor is going to self-serve. There are some people out there that will self-serve. Don't assume that they're going to, you say on your call with them, hey, go to my website, check this out, log into our portal, download this information, and that they're actually going to, one, do that, two, and remember you after their call. Because remember, if this is your first call with that investor, remember, you've taken them from a lead, you've gotten them on the phone call, they're probably calling 5 to 10 other operators, maybe even 20. How are you going to stand out from the rest? Okay. And again, it's being that person that's going to serve. Okay. Not just being the one that's like, I'm going to send you an email and like, yo, we're done. Right. Okay. So make sure that you're not assuming that that investor knows what to do next and that they're actually going to do it. Okay. And again, the most important thing that you can take away from this why slide is that this nurturing process, stepping into this role of being their educational partner, is a way to set yourself apart from the rest. Okay. You are setting yourself as somebody who cares about their outcomes, not yours. Okay. Now, okay. So again, we have to kind of pick this up from what we talked about at the end of the investment onboarding process. And where we talked at the end of the investor onboarding process, we said, we're going to send an onboarding email to them. It's an intro email. Okay. That's great. It's a gray line, right? It's part of the onboarding process, but it's also the beginning of your nurturing process, because this email should be amazing. Okay. In that email, you want to make sure that you're including your company overview, your strategy, your team, your track record. If you are a 506C operator, tell that person where they can find your open deals. Okay. You may not want to insert all your current opportunities in the email, because now you got to keep it updated all the time, but maybe point to a website to where they can find a current deal. You want to maybe point them to a direction or a page where they can find investor testimonials, okay, to where they can self-serve. But you want to make sure you're tracking all these links, because this is the email that you want to consistently over time optimize. Now, I've put in some things that I think track really well globally across the emails that I've done, but I will tell you, for every business, the type of investor that engages is different. So what links engage for your investor will be different from the links that engage for my investor. But these are some great things to start with. So this is an email to continually optimize. It is also an email that people sometimes, operators will like put a wall of information where it can get really clouded over and lost. Okay. I don't know about you. As somebody handed me a 3 or 4 page email, I'm going to open it up and go, whoa, I don't think I'm going to read that right now. I'll save that for later. And maybe I never come back to it. So make it something that's easy, digestible, and maybe again, organized in such a way to where they can keep one email and they know they can go find all that other information if they need it. All right. The one thing that you need to do at the end of this email is have one call to action, not 10. One call to action. So what is that call to action going to be for you? Are you going to have them read a prospectus? Maybe you just have one deal open and you want to just put that in front of them and say, hey, read this, let's schedule more time. Do you want them to immediately schedule another call? Do you want them to come to a webinar? Okay, put a call to action in that email. Okay, so essentially what you're doing is you're holding their hand and you're saying, okay, hey, this is the next step of the process. Okay, what are we going to do next? Okay, and again, that onboarding email starts our nurturing sequence, because remember at the very beginning I said small bites, right? Okay, now in that onboarding email, we also said don't send a wall of content, and here's why: because you should turn this onboarding email into an automated sequence that drips over the next couple weeks. Okay, now not everybody does this. Okay, but this is something that I've seen work really well, is that you can take that onboarding email and then drip it out like 2 or 3 days later and just being like, hey, just checking in. By the way, here is our updated track record, right? And here's a little, video that I put together for you from our founders. Drip that content out over the next couple of weeks. 1, you're staying top of mind. 2, you're going to hit on an obstacle or a question or something like that they had in the back of their mind and probably didn't ask. And then 3, you're going to set yourself out apart from everybody else, okay, by staying in contact that way. All right. So that's sequence number 1. Okay. We said there's 2 nurturing sequences that you need to implement. There's the short sequence, which is this, taking that onboarding email, chopping it up, making it really small bites, making it, I just thinking of you, here's something that I've put together specifically for you. Now you can automate that through your CRM, through maybe ActiveCampaign, HubSpot, that can all be automated. But the second sequence is what we call the conversion sequence. Okay, this is where you start kind of moving them down into your world. Okay, and we put them back in touch so that always have something to invite people to offer. Okay, what is that offer going to be that you do? This might be your call to action. For me, I use it as my call to action. My call to action in my emails when I onboard somebody is, hey, show up at this masterclass. I do it weekly. I do great education and training, and I do an ask me anything session at the end of this webinar. So you can join anytime. Can't join live? Fantastic. Just register and get the link, right? So I'm constantly engaging them and re-engaging them. Okay, so what is that going to be for you? Is it going to be a webinar? Are you going to do a podcast? Are you going to do a virtual meetup? You can do an in-person meetup. It doesn't have to be virtual. For me, I work with people all over the United States, so virtual works better for me. Also, I can link it out and I can track it and I can get metrics. It's a little bit easier than if I do an in-person type meetup. But what works best for your business? And you can always pivot this. Okay, but what are you going to do first? Where are you driving them? Okay, now I'm going to take a big breath here because this is what I hear. I interview people for our Passive Investing Made Simple Masterclass, where we train limited partners. I interview people for our Multifamily Investor Nation show. And I will tell you the one thing that it just kind of spins my head a little bit is at the end when I say, how can people find you? I usually get that wall of information. Yeah, you can find me. Here's our website. You can find me on Instabook. You can find me on LinkedIn. Are you on TikTok? Great. Here's my TikTok handle. And you know what? They're probably, that investor, you gave them 5 things to do. How many of them do you think they're going to do? Maybe one. Maybe one. Or the investor is going to be so confused and be like, I didn't write anything down. I'll look it up in the show notes later, which is not what you want them doing. You want them to have one thing that they can remember to do right now. So that is, you always have something to invite people to offer. Now you might have 7 things that you do. You might do a webinar, podcast, and virtual meetup. That's fine. But where's the one place you're going to drive them to? Okay. Now, how do you know what's working, right? We're all business owners here. Okay. So we always, if you're tracking your metrics, what are your key performance indicators? How do you know what's working, right? Because the investor actually investing is a lagging indicator. So we want to understand our lead indicators. What are those numbers that are moving that if we just affected and could tweak would lead to more investments or bringing more investors into our world, serving more people in our world? Well, there's a few things that you can actually track in this part of the funnel, okay? And that is tracking your topics, okay? And this can be down to the exact titles that you use for your emails. It can be the exact titles that you use for your webinars and podcasts. Okay, sometimes you don't have to recreate new content that attracts and nurtures the investors. Sometimes you might have missed the titling that resonated with them. I'll give you an example. I did a webinar back in September, and it was with our Kelly Garrett, our director of Rehab Wallet, managing partner of Rehab Wallet. And I mistitled the interview. And I was so shocked to see that just a handful of people registered for it. And I was like, man, I thought everybody in the world would want to know what we're talking about today. Okay, we're redoing the webinar. All I did was retitle the webinar. And guess what? We have far more people joining. Okay, so experiments with those topics. Okay, experiment with your different types of content that create value. Lean into the one that's giving you the best results. Okay, what is that 20% activity that's going to give you 80% of your results? track everything, your leads. Okay. Here I put some things here that I track. I track my titles, my content structure. Okay. And then whenever I put those titles and content structure out, I'm actually tracking engagement. How many people are registering? How many people are attending live? How many clicked and viewed the recording? How many people took action? Okay, if I ask them to take an action out of the people that were there, total people that were there and engaged with that content, how many people actually took action at the end of the show? Okay, all right. And then number 4, another way to see what might be working is to actually ask your audience what they want. Like, what do they want to hear about from you? What are their obstacles? What can you solve? Because if you're speaking directly to your audience, either personally at conferences, meetups, asking the question on your live webinars and podcasts, asking for that feedback, you will actually, they'll tell you what they want to hear from you about. Okay, so let's kind of wrap this up. What are some other ways that we can nurture our investor? Now, there's other sequences. These are probably things that you're doing right now. Okay, and if you're not, consider this. Add in sequences, maybe like a biannual State of the Union address, updating investors on what's going on in your company. All right. Now, here's the cool thing, kind of going back to our spider webbing content. You can do this as a webinar and then rip the audio, go put it out as a podcast, and then you can have the audio from the podcast translated, put it in a newsletter, and then you can chop that up, and now you've got some articles for about 6 months. So, there's all different ways that you can, take these larger pieces that you're putting together and, create nurturing content for your investors. Investor surveys. I've done this before. I actually love doing investor surveys. They can be pretty time intensive, and especially if you don't know how to analyze the data quickly. But investor surveys can be another great way to engage the investor. I'll put a little asterisk here, is that you're only going to hear from a subset of your investors. So don't take it as a global snapshot of your investor base, but really it's a great way to re-engage an investor that might have been stagnant, who likes you but doesn't, hasn't been too jazzed about what they're seeing in the market lately. So it's a great way to kind of glean some information. But again, to re-engage that investor, it's an amazing tool. And then monthly newsletters. Emailed monthly newsletters are great. Can you get investors' mailing addresses and do a mailed monthly newsletter or quarterly newsletter, whatever that looks like? And the reason why you might want to do mailed is so that investor, and maybe you send them 2 or 3 newsletters so they can actually hand your newsletter off to family and friends. Okay, so that investor nurturing could turn into being a referral source for you. What other things can you do to nurture that investor? There's one thing that I really like doing, and I call it "Where can they find you?" Making sure that you're making it known to either all your investor base or the relevant segment of your investor base. If you're in the area doing an investor dinner, like if you're going to Denver, Colorado, and I'm on your investor database, I want to get an invitation to that dinner. I want to know you're in the area, right? Investor meetups, okay? If you're going to go to a conference or an event, make sure you let your investors know so they can come talk to you and see you in person. If you're doing conferences, think about doing exclusive dinners and meetups and re-engaging around that conference, and re-engaging your investors, really getting to connect with them. If you're doing, if you put out a book or a publication or a new ebook, published a new book, make sure your investors know that, okay? Any sort of high value item. All right, so those are the things, making sure that they can find you and you're openly inviting them into your world. All right, so guys, again, this is kind of, wrapped at the tail end of our 5 must-have system, that investor nurturing system. And again, these systems, when put together, are really designed to help you build that credibility, that trust and transparency with your investor, take them on that journey. Guys, I've got us at 9:30. I'll hang out here for a little bit of Q&A, but this is your call to action. If you would like to learn more about what we're doing here at passiveinvesting.com, see our open deals, talk with me if you're a limited partner investor, reach out to us here at passiveinvesting.com. We'd love to help you in any way. Awesome. Got some Q&As coming in. What CRMs would you recommend that can be used for nurturing investors? So Arthur, this wouldn't be a separate CRM, customer relation management system. Active Campaign is one that a lot of people start with because there's great sliding scales for that. It's also, Active Campaign is a pretty easy marketing system to learn. If you're really tech centered and you love those kind of tech databases, HubSpot, if you could lean into HubSpot early, that's great. HubSpot tends to be really kind of a big system, too big for most people that are starting out. But as people grow their databases, say get over 3, 4, 5,000 investors they're working with, HubSpot becomes a very useful tool. But up until probably 4, 5, 6,000 investors, Active Campaign is probably where a good tool, and you can manage that pretty readily there. How can we find the other parts of the series? Yeah, so you can go to our Multifamily Investor Nation webinar page on YouTube, and the other series are there. Also, I'm going to be doing a larger deep dive on the end-to-end system and adding in additional things that I haven't talked about, how to convert your latent part of your list at our Multifamily Investor Nation conference here in June and in Charlotte, North Carolina. So be sure to join us there.